Should you answer a fool according to his folly? Proverbs 26:5 says yes, but Proverbs 26:4 says no.
Yeah.
Right?
Seeing that they're verses right one after another. So clearly there's something amiss here. But let's read these verses. Answer not a fool according to his folly, lest you be like him yourself. Verse 5, answer a fool according to his folly, lest he be wise in his own eyes. And so, yes, there does seem to be, well, which one do I do?
Right.
And in reading the Bible, we have to understand what we're reading. There's different genres, there's just different authors, different time periods. It's written in different languages. So we have to be concerned about kind of what we're reading. We can't just take it at face value that this is a history book that many people just want to claim, is a broad brush stroke of what the Bible is. Now, it
is a history book.
It is God's, revelation in time, but there are many different areas and genres that is being written about. Here, Proverbs is a book of poetry, and there's something known in Hebrew as parallelism.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's a better Hebrew word for it that doesn't tongue-tie you, but here it's comparing one thing, contrasting just the opposite, and there's a purpose for it. And you see it throughout the book of Proverbs, too, because there are we should say generalities that it's speaking towards. So with all things being equal, this is what you should do or not do, or seek after or not seek after. And so it's comparing what you should do here and what you shouldn't do.
Yeah, good. So what Dr. Lyle points out is this is a failure to distinguish between the different senses of how the phrase and the words are used, right? In other words, the sense is different between the two verses. In verse 24, it indicates, verse 4, Proverbs 26:4, indicates that a fool should not be answered according to his folly in the sense of becoming like him, right? So you kind of assume that what he's saying is correct, and so you follow his presupposition, his assumption, right. And therefore you're becoming like him when you answer him according to his folly.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
So those of us who have studied presuppositionalism probably have come to know this, because this is kind of where we get our understanding of how we argue or fight or answer people who have doubtful questions, or who are attacking you, or anything that you're called to stand to give a reason for your faith. One of the critiques in kind of the discussion currently of apologetics is where do you meet the unbeliever at? Do you just hit him with facts, and hopefully he'll be weighed down by how many facts towards the resurrection there are, or if you show him enough bits of pottery to show that the fact that King David might have existed during this time frame should get me to believe in a deity, or do you assume that every little bit of information or evidence out there is evidence of God? And presuppositionalists think that that's what the Bible claims, and so there's no arguing based on neutral ground. Let me set aside my Bible and let me argue from wherever you're at as an unbeliever. Well,
kind of like fact attacked, right? Where now you throw your facts, he throws his facts, and they're facts attacks. Yeah. And that's not usually that's not a really effective way to get someone to at least think about or even change their mind.
Right. There are many good reasons to kind of have that presuppositional standpoint. And just one of the main reasons is it's not actually what you believe, and you're trying to have the person understand, no, I believe God is in charge of all things, and so everything out there is part of his evidence. And for me to set aside my Bible and say that it's not the ultimate standard of truth, that I'm lying to you, and it's essentially what I'm told not to do.
Yeah. And so with this particular approach, it's kind of a disruptive approach where we try to get behind get away. Nothing wrong with giving facts.
Sure.
That's very important.
Right.
In fact, that's the way oftentimes the apostles preached, right?
Mm-hmm.
Jesus was raised from the dead, right? It was a fact, right? So nothing wrong with that. In fact, it's effective. It's what God uses and that sort of thing. But this kind of approach tries to get behind the facts, kind of a disruptive worldview approach where we try to get the unbeliever off kilter with regard to, okay, fine, you believe that, but what has to be the case for that to be true? Mm-hmm. Now let's think through that, because we want to have them examine their worldview and that sort of thing. So the other verse on this verse says, don't answer. The other verse says, answer, right? Mm-hmm. And that's kind of where the idea, it might be a contradiction. But again, the idea of answer here in the other verse, Proverbs 26:5 indicates that the fool should be answered in such a way as to notice, expose his fallacy. That's what Lyle wants us to see, so that he cannot be wise in his own estimation. So, for instance, in one of his earlier books, in fact, the first one that we worked through, mm-hmm. The Ultimate Proof of Creation, he makes this kind of one of the central ways to deal with an apologetic method to deal with the unbeliever. He calls this a two-step strategy that's found in Proverbs 26:4 and 5. The first step is we don't answer. Right? We do not answer the unbeliever according to his folly, that is, his fallacious presuppositions, right? These are what his assumptions are, and we don't buy those. So we say, no, we don't agree with that particular fallacious, false presupposition. But then we come back and say, but what would happen if what you believed is true? Mm-hmm. And so we answer them according to their fallacious presupposition, right, to show them that how the folly, the foolishness of what they're believing, or what they're claiming.
So one of the good examples that I always think kind of shows this forthright is the problem of evil. So you're talking with someone that says, if God exists, how can there be so much evil in the world? You have serial killers and murderers and rapists, and all these things happen, and they're all evil, evil, evil. Can you explain that to your God? Yeah. Your God existing? Well, there's an answer for that. You can talk about humans having a product of their free will to do what's according to their nature, and so they act out in accordance with their nature. You can talk about how the love of God comes in and changes those hearts to show a greater impact of how salvation changes people. You look at the Apostle Paul, you point to the cross and say, here you have the very first innocent man put on trial and killed. He's completely innocent of everything at any time, and point to what that means. But the very fact that he or she uses the term evil, there's a presupposition embedded into that. So you look at it and you go, hold on just a second, let's make sure that we're talking about the same thing. What do you call evil? By what standard do you have to say murder is wrong? Because according to a naturalistic argument that believes in evolution and survival of the fittest, murder is just what happens in the animal kingdom too, and there's really no
it could be. It's just an action. Yeah. If there is no standard, then it's just an action. We may not like it, right? But so what? Putting evil to it, where does that come from? Right? It's just an action, right? If a lion kills a gazelle, we don't say, the lion is evil, it's a murder, and that's what. No, it's just an action that happens in nature. So what's this? Why are you calling one action evil and another? Where does your standard come from? And is it an absolute universal standard, or is it just something that you're making up, or maybe even your society is making up? And if that's the case, why should I accept it?
Yeah, in a postmodern world, maybe it's evil for you to kill people, but on the other side of the world, it's not evil. Yeah. Who's to say? How do we come to that standard? And it's interesting to argue those points too, because you could be talking to the best behavioral scientist in the world who knows the intricacies of the mind and how choices are made, But then you can take a step back and say, well, hold on, let's talk about where we get those definitions from, where we get our standards from. If there are contradictions like people are claiming in this book, how do you know contradictions are a bad thing? Or how do you know that they exist? What if 2 + 2 = 4 here, but on the other side of the moon it's not? It's not 4.
Yeah, and especially with the problem of evil, right? So we step back and we say, we're really asking the question, what has to be the case in order for evil to exist, or in order for us to call something evil? What has to be the case? Well, there has to be a standard that we're saying, something either does or it doesn't meet that standard, right? Okay, well, where does that come from? Well, it has to do with humanity. The standard is what's good for us. Well, why is that the standard, right? Why isn't it what's good for an amoeba or a giraffe? Why do we have to be? Well, we're thinking beings. So what? So if an alien comes down that's more sophisticated and thinking than we are, and they like human meat, we have to change the standard because they determine it? Well, that's ridiculous, right? We would all say, no, that's not the case, because we know that there is good and there is evil, and the standard comes from the true and the living God. By having God as our standard, particularly God's character as our standard. Now, we have an ultimate standard that is universal because he is an infinite God and his character is our standard. But they have they borrowed from the Christian worldview in order to make an argument for evil.
Right. So saying something is evil and it's wrong, there are two there. How are they defining evil? They're getting that from an understanding that there is a good and an evil, which comes from a biblical worldview, and that there can be an economic viewpoint, that one is better than the other. And so if actions are just actions in this world, and we're all bumping into each other as space broccoli or stardust or whatever you want to term it, then who cares if that extra bump causes the cessation of existence in that other person? And what's the difference between a human and a dog, other than they're just different species? You don't want to be specious.
Yes.
So this putting up the mirror in front of them and saying, this is what you're arguing, and saying, let's make sure that you're coming to terms with the ideas that you're presenting and the presuppositions you're bringing, and you have to kind of build up your own worldview, because I have a worldview that I'm proclaiming through God's word as God's revelation to the world, and I'm proclaiming it, and that's the don't be like the person, because what you can do is you can kind of present argumentation that isn't biblical, that kind of works in the argument, but it won't present the true gospel that you're trying to come up with. So you may say something like, this may get me in trouble, but that God has middle knowledge, and that he kind of looks down the corridors of time, and so he doesn't really interact with evil actions until they kind of happen upon, and then he's got to react to it, and so he doesn't quite have complete full knowledge. Or
so if you believe that would probably get you in trouble.
Yeah, right. I would hope so. But there are people, and there are true Christians that I would say that believe that too. However, I think that's a hard tenet to hold. But that's one of the dangers that you make by saying, okay, well, let me put my Bible aside and not argue from a biblical point of view, but let me kind of take you up on your offer and say, well, let's look at the best possible worlds, or let's imagine a world without evil. And so you kind of construct a world that doesn't exist and that doesn't speak to what you're trying to point them to, which is what the Bible says about who God is.
Good. And so the Bible says that God is good, right? God is good. So that's our standard. He is our standard. His character, holy, righteous, good character, is our standard. And so if the unbeliever doesn't have that, they really have I mean, their standard is kind of up in the air. And so, according to Proverbs 26:4-5, we don't answer the fool according to his folly, right? We say, well, wait a minute, I don't accept your standard of good and evil. But what would happen if I did? Where does it come from? How did you gather it? And if we assume that there is no God, then where do we come up with the notion of good or evil? Well, I mean, we might say something harms us, but so what? Why is that evil or even good? There's good harm and evil harm and all kinds of
surgery
things, right?
is bad, but it's also good.
Yeah. So, so this one then is we have to distinguish between the two senses of the terms. In fact, what Lyle says is that in verse 4, the verb for answer is in the imperfect form in the Hebrew language, indicating that it is descriptive. And in verse 5, the verb answer is in the imperative form, and it commands us to answer the fool in such a way that he ceases foolishness.
Yeah. So when we take the Bible for what it is and we see the imperatives, those are the commands to us or to somebody, we should kind of take that seriously. So we have to understand, does this verse apply to us? I would say that yes, it does, and so.
And is it contradictory? No, it's not, because it's different senses. We're taking the term answer in different senses.
Right. Yeah. So even within it, we kind of have to understand the Hebrew for it, so that would help us, get these descriptive and imperative verb forms as well. So that would help.
Yeah, good. So that one's a lengthy one, but I think it's important because it helps us to clearly understand a particular philosophical approach, we might say, worldview approach to the whole notion of what apologetics is all about, right? It helps us to say, so really what we're answering in this kind of apologetics is for the unbeliever, okay, if that's your claim, what would have to be the case for it to be true? And so we try to step back, get behind, the basic idea and see if we can allow the assumption, the presupposition that they have to float to the top, so that then we can examine that. And if it's a biblical presupposition, we say, that's what we believe. You've stolen it because you don't have any basis for it.
Hold on,
right?
now.
Yeah. If it's not, then we can show where it's wrong. Right?
And we can do this for any of these questions. There are presuppositions built into any claim that you make. From the sense that you're looking for an answer to your question, you're assuming that there's order in the universe, and so there's the big assumption right there is why do we assume order rather than not order?
Yeah.
Everything that we should see, especially starting from a supposed Big Bang. Usually, Big Bangs create big messes, not big order. So we should be seeing a breakdown of something. So, but even within these, we can kind of take a step back and say, I can answer your question here, but let's take a look at why you're assuming, the murder of the Canaanites is an atrocity. Well, okay, first of all, why is it an atrocity? Why is it considered? Why is an atrocity considered bad? Why is murder bad? All these things you can kind of attack as your primary focus of the question, and then say, if we assume that the Bible's true, then God claims that he's just and he carries out judgment against sin, and this is one of the means by which sin is carried out, is why he commands his people to clear the Canaanites.
Yeah, very good. All right, so this one has taken quite a bit of time, so it might be good here. We've gone quite a ways here.
Yeah, we thought we were going to get way more than this. But I would say that then this is a good kind of introduction, and obviously this is one that Lyle has used in his other book, but it's a good understanding of where to kind of leap off from presuppositional apologetics. And again, that's maybe a scary word, but presupposition apologetics just means that you're attacking the assumptions that someone looks at the world ends. So
their worldview.
Yeah, their worldview. Imagine like their glasses, and it's how they look at things. So you have two paleontologists, one's from Answers in Genesis, one's from Biologos, and they go, oh, that's millions of years of evolution that brought that bone there.
That fossil.
Yeah,
right,
or that's the result of a worldwide flood. So
it's only thousands of years.
Yeah,
right.
So it's not this is my evidence over here for evolution. This is and this one is my evidence for creationism. It's the understanding that everything in the world is evidence for God, and that's clearly taken from God's Word, especially I think Romans 1 tends to be kind of our plant back at home collection of verses for presuppositionalists. So it's not as scary as the term as you are thinking that it might be, and also it gives you kind of another arrow in your quiver to say, well, let's take a step back, and I can answer this question or find answers for this question, but let's look at what your presuppositions are. And so, we spent, I think, maybe 6 years now, although we really honed it in 3. So if you take 3 years, you can really kind of start getting an understanding of how to break down what someone's argumentation is. And for Lyle's other book, Ultimate Proof of Creation, he has a list of people that have written in, and he breaks it down like that. So that's really good. So I point to that
we
as
would recommend that book as well. That one was, as we have said a couple of times now during this series, that was the one that kind of got us started.
Yep. Well, because of a single chapter in one of the other books that we just read, and we're like, oh, that sounds nice. So we picked it up.